What's going on, guys? JPA here, and I'm going to be going over how to spot reversals in SPY. So, pretty straightforward. Not going to really do anything too complicated in here. Just going to kind of give you what happened today with the play that we went through for our example and what you can look for in the future. So, as we get into it, just want to say thanks for always all the support here, Twitter, everywhere, and let's get going. So, today we took the SPY 380 puts, and here's where we entered it right at 11:30, 11:40, and you go, well, that's like perfect timing. Did you really do it then? So we go, so here it is, 11:40 a.m. Bought our SPY puts for 84 cents. So if you're just looking at this segment of the chart, and I'm looking at the 30-minute view on TrendSpider, so it looks like you're just going to keep going up and up and up, and why do you want to stop here? So what I look at is kind of where all these candles have their high at. So you're seeing like a 385, 385.8, 385.55 again, 385.24, 385.09. So you can do a couple things. You can either just manually kind of draw in, say, hey, get that up there. Say, hey, here's a zone that looks like there's been some trouble. There's been some selling once we get up to this area. You can use these as supply demand zone, whatever you want to call them. But I just kind of call them the areas of resistance. And same thing, we had this big shoot down afterwards. It had a big ramp, then dropped down. So you know that kind of violent move up is coming. So here was our violent move down, then kind of a measured move back up, back into that area. So I said, well, I'll start buying it. I bought it the second 385 broke today, just because I knew it didn't seem very, like it tested 386 a lot before having that test back down to like 382s. So knowing all that, there was enough premium that we could capture. Even if we only had to move down to 382, it would still have been a double, and that was kind of reflected in the trims I took. So there's SpongeBob going crazy, but just going through the quote tweets. So a lot of stuff going on. So we had the first initial quick sell, which was 5 minutes, so that's where I felt pretty good just right away. Usually when you see an option start to work in your favor early, tends to give you more. So we got that 50%. And that happened at 11:21. So 11:21. Not 12:21. My bad. So right about here, we had that drawdown, kind of that first drawdown. Took some profits early because, again, these were shorter dated. They were only good for November 9th, and obviously we have the election going on. So these shorter dated ones, you kind of want to make sure to book your profits a little bit earlier, especially with the markets we've had. I've been kind of sticking to 50% as my first trim, as opposed to, before I used to have 100% as my first trim. But then where it got good was we really just kind of got that big sell. And it just started ramping down, kind of had the percents going with you. I took a ton of them off at 3.15 just because they went in the money, and there was such big premium attached to them. So one thing you got to be observant of, especially with these 0 days or 2 days to expiration, is what's the biggest move do you think can happen? And then just do the math backwards. So if it's at 377, how much lower do I really think it's going to go than 377 by the time it bounces? So I already saw here that 381, it bounced up and had a huge move. So I said, well, I'm really starting to test fate once it goes below 381. And even here, that huge sell candle down from 388, it stopped at 379. So you got to remember is you got to kind of calculate how far can this really go, and what am I risking, what am I holding? So I saw there's a lot of people who were kind of like saying, hey, how long do I hold it for? I think someone asked it. Sorry to put you on blast. If I find you, can't find them, but someone said hey, when do we take our trims? So if you got to ask when to take your trims, usually you should have already taken your trims. So back to circling what we were looking at. So we had a lot of chop with the play, so it didn't move too much but we bought the next days to not really worry about it, because the election, that catalyst event, same thing with CPI coming up on Thursday. If you buy the day after the catalyst event, the premium's not going to move too much because the catalyst event is what's holding everything intact. So that was kind of the reason. I mean, obviously I could have made much more money if I would have did SPX, single day to expiration. But during this chop here, you would have really had big drawdowns. You probably would have been down like negative 50% or more on your SPX. And I personally just size my positions, don't use stops, but a lot of people use stop losses and they might have got stopped out or what have you. Whereas the lowest I think this play went was negative like 5%. Excuse me. So really, really good timing and positioning. And it's even a little bit more clear here if I go to the daily to show you that 385. So where you see right here, October 27th, we had a daily high of 385. I just go ahead and draw a little segment. Obviously everything looks very simple in hindsight, where you can say like, oh, well, like you had a low of 385, a high of 385, and then today's high of 385.12. So when you start to see these numbers start repeating, that's where you want to say, hey, here's a point of interest. What can I use for it? I mean, a lot of people use fibs. A lot of people can do all kinds of fancy stuff, but usually the simpler you can make things for yourself, the more successful you'll be. You don't want to. There's not a grand formula. There's not like you can't just magically calculate everything that needs done. You got to say, hey, here's what makes sense to me. Here's what I can do and execute based off of everything. Like for me, I don't post a ton of trades during this market because I simply either don't have the technical background to do all the fibs, to do all the retracements, to do all the every different thing to get those really consistent 20 or 30% moves with the occasional big ones. I'd rather really wait for something to set up in my favor that I like, take the move, grab the move, and get the jump up. And same thing, you can kind of draw your patterns. Like here on the daily, just kind of remove all these annotations. And just say, hey, here is a peak. Draw it down, and it lines up really nice. And then take this and say, okay, we're at a decision point 2, and it's probably unlikely to, excuse me, to break out of this decision point before the elections come. So knowing that, like, you're not going to see a big, I mean, we were already up nicely today. Let's kind of jump back to the 30-minute. So we already had that nice run up. So it's pretty unlikely that before a huge catalyst like the elections come out, that it's going to keep drilling higher. It's likely going to hit that area of resistance and say, hey, we need something to push us either the rest of the way through or send us back down. And same thing, like you got down to an area of support and say, hey, it's probably unlikely for us to sell and push down, and it bounced. Now, obviously, it would have, like, we took a lot of profits, and I went down to 1, and it would have been nice to see more further downside to get kind of called. Like, I would have loved for it to get down to like 375. I mean, I don't think, like, so right here, so like the end of that candle before that gap down, or I mean, you just kind of see like, hey, there's all these closes that are wrapping up here. Go back to the daily, see where there's like starting to get packed in either daily closes, candle closes, and say, hey, how can I take this to my advantage? So hopefully this helped. I try to keep it short and sweet. TrendSpider, I mean, great program. I'll put a link in the description for 25% off if anybody's interested. And yeah, if you enjoyed it and learned from the video, feel free to like and leave a comment down below. Let me know you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.